To a casual tourist, the dazzling lights of Tokyo's chic districts may appear as a reflection of ongoing prosperity. However, to an economist, a notable anomaly emerges. The majority of Tokyo's urban development transpired during the 1980s, characterized by the distinctive architectural style of that era known as constructivism. This observation leads to a stark conclusion. The economic boom that transformed Tokyo occurred over 3 decades ago. During that time, Japan had surged to the forefront of global economic leadership, even surpassing the United States. Yet, history has taken a different course, and the nation finds itself still grappling with the aftermath of the bursting of the economic bubble from the 1980s. The Meiji Restoration, commencing in 1868, marked a pivotal moment in Japan's history. During this era, Emperor Meiji and his advisors spearheaded reforms to modernize the nation. These reforms encompassed the abolition of the samurai class, the adoption of Western-style governance and institutions, and a focus on industrialization and technological progress. Guided by the Meiji government, Japan rapidly industrialized, investing in infrastructure, railways, and a robust military, while also promoting education and the assimilation of Western knowledge and technology. This modernization enabled Japan to catch up with Western powers and emerge as a significant global player. But all these achievements were destroyed by Japan's aggressive participation in the Second World War. During the initial phase of development following the end of World War II in 1945, the primary emphasis was placed on export-oriented light industries. These industries encompassed the production of items such as clothing, textiles, and small household goods. This choice was guided by a logical rationale. These sectors could efficiently utilize unskilled labor. It is worth noting that even Toyota, one of Japan's largest corporations, has historical ties to the textile industry. The implementation of the Marshall Plan by the U.S. during its occupation of the Japanese islands from 1945 to 1952 further bolstered these efforts. A couple of reforms were made: agrarian reform, curtailing labor union rights, dismantling price controls, simplifying taxation, and establishing a budget free from deficits. The large industrial conglomerates, such as Mitsubishi, Mitsui, Sumitomo, and Yasuda, which have their roots in the Meiji Restoration, endured the post-war years in a significantly altered form. In terms of ownership structure, the traditional single-family hierarchy at the top was replaced by horizontal connections among smaller conglomerate companies. These companies subsequently aligned themselves around influential banks that provided financing for all companies within the group. The Japanese embarked on a remarkable journey of economic transformation by importing Western technologies, an essential catalyst for their success. Between the 1950s and 1970s, they procured more than 15,000 patents and licenses, predominantly from the United States. Rather than investing extensive resources in research, they strategically acquired rights to existing products, subsequently enhancing them. This strategic approach yielded impressive results in terms of GDP growth rates. During the 1960s, Japan achieved an astonishing average annual growth rate of 10%. Meanwhile, exports expanded even more rapidly, surging at a rate of 17% annually during the 1960s. Starting from a modest $4.1 billion a year in 1960, Japanese exports soared to a staggering $287 billion by 1990. Japan inundated the global market with a diverse array of products, including cars, ships, optics, electrical equipment, sewing machines, radios, cameras, and televisions. While the pursuit of perfectionism and a high-end orientation would come later, the primary advantage of Japanese goods during the 1950s and 1960s was their competitive pricing. Japanese diligence coupled with Western technology, a relentless focus on export markets, political stability, and access to American and European markets that welcomed Japanese products all contributed to this impressive economic ascent. In a historic milestone, Japan rose to become the world's second-largest economy in 1968, a position it held until 2010, when it yielded that spot to China. During the 1980s, Japan was regarded as a technological powerhouse that had surged ahead of the United States. During that era, there was a prevailing belief that Japan was on the brink of becoming the world's largest economy, similar to how many view China today. These predictions never came true. In the 1980s, Japan's remarkable economic growth began to raise concerns in the West, much like China's current expansion is causing apprehension. The proliferation of inexpensive Japanese exports had a detrimental impact on various industries in other countries, rendering them less competitive. In 1985, Japan yielded to the pleas of the United Kingdom, as well as the United States, Germany, and France, and agreed to revalue the yen against the dollar, an agreement famously known as the Plaza Accord. Consequently, Japanese exports lost some of their cost advantage, leading to a deterioration in the trade balance. In an effort to counteract the adverse effects of the strengthening yen, which had transitioned from 250 yen per dollar in 1975 to 130 yen per dollar in 1989, Tokyo pursued a policy of expanding investment, lowering lending rates, and reducing interest rates from 5% in 1985 to 2.25% in 1989. This led to an unprecedented surge in bank balances and a surge in optimism. The zenith of this economic boom occurred in the late 1980s, marked by excessive credit expansion and speculation in assets and real estate. In 1989, the price of commercial space in Tokyo's Ginza district soared to as much as $1 million per square meter. Japanese business leaders enjoyed a life of luxury. By 1989, Japan boasted 1,700 golf clubs with 1.8 million members. The cost of club memberships often exceeded several $million, with a total cumulative value of all memberships reaching $200 billion. Alongside the asset bubble, another bubble was swelling. The popularity of Japanese companies' stocks and bonds granted them easy access to capital, leading to an expansion of production. Companies like Toyota, Sony, Honda, and Mitsubishi ramped up their output. However, it became evident that such a volume of production would unlikely find corresponding demand in the global market, and this realization came suddenly, as it often does. In late 1989, Japanese exporters began to sense a decline in demand from Europe and the US, largely due to the Federal Reserve's series of interest rate hikes. This served as the catalyst for the impending economic collapse. By 1990, Japanese assets experienced a harsh sell-off, with the Nikkei 225 stock index plummeting from its peak of 38,957 in December 1989 to 20,984 in September 1990. Its current value stands at around 31,000. As stocks were often used as collateral for loans, banks uncovered vulnerabilities in their balance sheets and subsequently froze lending. Many companies either reduced production or went bankrupt, leading to reduced public demand for goods, credit, and real estate. The bubble had burst. Only through substantial government intervention was Japan able to avert a severe recession in the 1990s. In response to declining private demand and investment, the government significantly increased its own spending by adopting a deficit budget strategy. This economic downturn placed significant strain on borrowers, both corporate and private, including those with mortgages. During the height of the bubble, people purchased real estate without anticipating a potential price drop. The inflated bubble drove property prices beyond the reach of ordinary Japanese citizens. Consequently, many were compelled to live hundreds of kilometers away from the city and commute to work. The decline in real estate prices began in the latter half of 1991, ultimately resulting in nearly a 50% decrease in prices over 23 years. The collapse also took a toll on the banking sector. Liabilities remained substantial while asset values declined. Throughout the 1990s, the government opted against reforming the banking system, fearing it would precipitate a more catastrophic economic collapse. Zombie banks, propped up through various means, such as not writing off the debts of insolvent zombie companies and overvaluing them on balance sheets, along with numerous mergers, persisted. The fragility of the banking sector significantly contributed to the prolonged economic stagnation. Since the bubble's collapse in 1991, Japan's economic growth has lagged behind that of the United States, with an average annual GDP growth of 0.9% compared to 2.5% in the US. The 1990s in Japan are widely referred to as the lost decade. Unfortunately, the 2000s and the 2010s didn't fare much better, with average GDP growth rates of 0.8% and 0.9%, respectively. This extended period of sluggish growth presented a dilemma, as an alternative strategy envisioned a rapid and painful decline, but one that could potentially pave the way for a more robust and revitalized economic system. Another contributing factor to the economic stagnation is demographics. Japan's working-age population, comprising individuals between the ages of 15 and 64, reached its zenith at 87.3 million in 1995, but has since dwindled to 78.9 million. While Japan faces challenges, it also possesses strengths such as a highly skilled workforce, advanced technology, and a culture of innovation. The government has undertaken initiatives to promote economic growth, but the pace and success of these efforts will determine the trajectory of Japan's economy in the near future.